The field hummed with electricity long before the first clouds rolled overhead, and I could feel it in my bones. Standing there among the weather sensors, the tension in the air was almost tactile, like the sky itself was holding its breath. I was checking the readings, adjusting cables. When it happened, a sudden, sharp static jolt shot through my arm and chest. My body tensed violently, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. It didn't hurt, nothing physical broke, but it left me utterly disoriented. My pulse raced, every nerve ending alive with awareness. In that instant, everything in my life became blindingly clear. Not the storm above me, not the sensors around me, but the storm I had ignored for months in my own personal life. Adrian. His sly smiles, the carefully timed disappearances, the inexplicable secrets, everything that had felt like minor anomalies suddenly became glaringly intentional. Back at the lab, I tried to steady my hands, but I couldn't stop replaying that electric shock in my mind. It was a metaphor, wasn't it? For the deception I'd been blind to. For the way I'd been shocked into a half-consciousness, thinking my life with Adrian was stable, when all along it had been wired incorrectly, dangerously. I pulled up the live feed from one of Adrian's weather monitoring cameras, installed near a small office for one of his projects. The camera was meant to stream only the weather for public access, but a glitch had briefly rerouted it to another system. My heart skipped when the feed flickered for a few seconds. In that tiny window, I saw it, the interior of a kitchen I hadn't known existed. Adrian stood there, comfortable, relaxed, wearing a t-shirt that had gone missing from my apartment months ago. And beside him, so intimately, so casually, was Tessa. She moved around him with a domestic ease I had never shared. The sight froze me in my chair, and the realization hit like lightning. My entire relationship had been built on illusions, carefully curated to keep me blind. I sank into my chair, staring at the frozen frame. My hands shook, not with anger, but with clarity. The static had been a warning. The feed was proof. Everything I had trusted was a construction, an illusion of stability that had never existed. Adrian had created a false forecast for my life, and I had believed it without question. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel fully awake. Not hurt, not betrayed, just aware. My life would have to change, and quickly. The storm above mirrored the one inside me, and I realized that surviving one required navigating the other. I whispered to the empty lab, "I see it now. I see everything." And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to act. I couldn't stop staring at the frozen image on my laptop. Adrian and Tessa, laughing, leaning into each other, moving around a kitchen that felt like a home I'd never known existed. My pulse hammered in my ears. Months of little doubts, little inconsistencies, suddenly made sense. Every missed call, every business trip, every unexplained expense was no accident. I replayed the glitched feed frame by frame, heart sinking with every passing second. The technology had betrayed Adrian's secrets before I even realized I needed proof. A single digital misfire, a fleeting moment, and suddenly I could see the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. I shut the laptop for a second, leaned back, and let the shock of it all sink in. The kitchen was warm, bright, ordinary in every way, but the ordinariness made it worse. It screamed domesticity, intimacy, permanence. Adrian's smirk had always felt like charm, but now it looked like premeditated deception. I could almost hear him now. "Juniper, it's just a glitch. Don't overthink it." But I knew it wasn't a glitch. Not this time. This was the truth exposing itself, and I had the chance to confront it. I had the chance to stop pretending that I didn't see. The realization made my hands shake, but it also ignited a strange sense of power. I was alive. I had survived the static shock, I had survived the betrayal, and I had evidence. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I pulled up Adrian's financial logs next. Something about the way he set up Tessa's company accounts had always seemed off, and now the pieces fit together. Money from his weather app, resources meant for shared research projects, quietly diverted. My stomach churned at the thought of how long this had been going on, and how I had been completely unaware. I paced my small apartment, trying to think clearly. What could I do? Who could I trust? And then it hit me, Ronan, Adrian's former best friend. The one person who had always questioned Adrian's ethics, who had walked away from the company because of them. I picked up the phone with trembling fingers. Ronan, I need you, I whispered, though no one was on the line yet. I think he's been lying. About everything. I explained as much as I could, stopping short of admitting the feed glitch, but I sent him a screenshot anyway. The silence on the other end was heavy, and then his voice came, calm but intense. Juniper, you've got proof. Good. We handle this smart, quiet. I'll help you get everything documented, everything analyzed. Something in me relaxed. Not completely, not yet, but I had an ally. Someone who understood the weight of evidence, who wouldn't let emotion cloud judgment. For the first time since the static shock, I felt like I could breathe again. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside, but now, for the first time, I had a plan. Adrian's forecast of my life had been false. Now it was my turn to predict the future. And I intended to get it right. The next morning, I woke up feeling like my world had tilted on its axis. Adrian's face, laughing with Tessa, haunted my vision. Every cup of coffee, every mundane conversation I'd shared with him over the past months now felt hollow, scripted. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen, nor could I pretend it didn't matter. I turned my laptop back on, determined to document everything. The glitch had given me a fleeting window, but I needed more. Proof that couldn't be dismissed. I logged into Adrian's weather monitoring account, tracing camera logs and timestamps. The feed from Tessa's office repeated itself in a loop for just a fraction of a second before reverting to the usual outdoor monitoring. That fraction, that single, almost accidental view, was the reality of his life without me. My fingers trembled as I replayed it again. Adrian in that worn t-shirt of mine, his arm around her waist. She smiled up at him in that way that made it clear she wasn't just a casual partner. She was his chosen companion, the one he built a life with. Every small gesture screamed intimacy. The way he touched her hand, the way they leaned together over the breakfast counter, the casual rhythm of a home established long before I realized I was excluded. I thought back to all the little inconsistencies in his stories, every conference or tech workshop that never quite made sense. Every time I questioned him, he would smooth over my doubts with charm, leaving me feeling paranoid for suspecting him. And now, with one glitched feed, the truth revealed itself. He had spent months hiding this, building a secret domestic life that wasn't just real, it was thriving. I felt the surge of betrayal, but also an odd, electric clarity. This was the moment my rebirth demanded. See the truth, document it, act on it. I couldn't afford emotional hesitation. I needed to focus on evidence and strategy. I reached for my phone and called Ronan. His calm, grounded presence had always been a counterpoint to Adrian's manipulative energy. I need your help, I said, keeping my voice steady. I've found something undeniable. Adrian and Tessa, they're living together, and it's not new. He's been hiding it for months, maybe years. There was a pause on the line. Then, Ronan's voice, firm but reassuring. Show me everything. We'll make sure nothing slips through the cracks. We document, analyze, and expose. Carefully. Strategically. I emailed him the screenshots from the glitch, along with my notes on Adrian's recent financial transactions, subtle diversions I'd noticed over the last few months. As I hit send, a strange sense of liberation washed over me. For the first time, I wasn't trapped in Adrian's lies. I was seeing clearly, preparing to act. I stared out the window, watching the clouds swirl above the field stations where I worked. Lightning streaked in the distance, a reminder of the shock that had sparked this awakening. My life, once forecasted by Adrian's manipulations, was now mine to predict. And with Ronan by my side, I knew the truth wouldn't just surface. It would be broadcast, unfiltered, and undeniable. By the next morning, my apartment felt more like a war room than a living space. Every surface was covered with spreadsheets, screenshots, and financial logs. The glitch had given me a glimpse, but Ronan had a knack for connecting dots that I couldn't see alone. Together, we traced Adrian's subtle diversions, funds siphoned from the weather app company to Tessa's remote business accounts, minor expenses disguised as research grants, and recurring payments that coincided suspiciously with their trips. Ronan leaned over my laptop, his brow furrowed. He's careful, but not meticulous. Look here, these transfers are small, so they fly under the radar, but they're consistent. And see this one? He pointed to a chain of transactions that had been labeled innocuous on the surface. This covers Tessa's renovations at her property. He's been funding her lifestyle without a hint to anyone else. I felt a jolt of disbelief, mixed with fury. Every subtle lie, every excuse Adrian had given me now had context. The financial evidence matched the intimate domesticity I'd witnessed. He had been leading a double life, professionally, personally, and morally. And yet, there was something almost satisfying in seeing it laid bare, pixel by pixel, spreadsheet by spreadsheet. I always suspected something was off, I admitted, voice tight. The conference trips, the sudden meetings, the little inconsistencies. I just didn't have proof. Now you do, Ronan replied, his tone steady. And with this, we can expose him without leaving you vulnerable. It's about facts, Juniper. No emotion clouds the evidence. I exhaled, trying to calm the mix of adrenaline and lingering shock. Ronan was right. The rebirth he kept reminding me about wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity, about reclaiming the narrative of my own life. Adrian could no longer dictate it. Over the next few hours, we cross-referenced all the data. Dates of travel, transfers, and property maintenance lined up perfectly with the domestic rhythm I'd seen in the feed. Everything told the same story, a life built on deception, one I'd unwittingly been a part of. Ronan leaned back, a small smile breaking his serious expression. You've got the truth. And you've got me. We'll handle this carefully. Exposure doesn't mean chaos. It means clarity for everyone involved. Especially you. I smiled faintly, feeling the first flicker of genuine relief. For the first time, I wasn't the one being deceived in isolation. I had an ally, someone who valued integrity as much as I did. I felt the weight of months of manipulation begin to lift. Let's make a plan, I said, clicking through the financial reports. We expose the misconduct, show the diversion of funds, and make sure Tessa's involvement is clear. This isn't just personal. This is professional and ethical. Ronan nodded, already drafting a strategy. And we'll protect you every step of the way. Truth, transparency, and impact. As I watched the storm clouds gathering outside my window, I felt a surge of empowerment. The static lightning flash that had once awakened me now seemed to pulse in rhythm with my determination. I was no longer forecasted by Adrian's lies. I was the one shaping my future, and for the first time, it was entirely my own. The day began with a quiet sense of purpose. I met Ronan at his small office near the edge of town, where the air smelled faintly of ozone and damp earth. A storm had passed overnight. He had already compiled a dossier of Adrian's financial irregularities, cross-referenced with the footage from Tessa's home. Seeing it all laid out, the enormity of Adrian's deception hit me fully, but it also steeled me. I was no longer just a victim of his duplicity. I was an active participant in correcting the record. Ronan looked up from the stack of papers. We'll start with the most verifiable, non-emotional facts, he said. The transfers, the property renovations, the misappropriated company funds. If we release this carefully, we minimize speculation and maximize impact. I nodded, feeling a strange thrill. I had never been the sort to take matters into my own hands so directly, but now, each step was deliberate. The rebirth Ronan had reminded me of wasn't just about seeing the truth, it was about acting on it. Our plan began with a discreet email to the regulatory board overseeing tech startups. Ronan crafted it meticulously, highlighting the anomalies, the dates, the chain of command, and the evidence we had. I double-checked every screenshot, every spreadsheet, every timestamp. Even without speaking, I could feel the confidence in my chest, a newfound authority in my hands. By mid-morning, I was reviewing press contacts. I wanted the story controlled, framed by facts rather than gossip. Ronan and I drafted a statement that outlined Adrian's misuse of company resources to fund Tessa's lifestyle, the ethical violations inherent in the diversion of funds, and the precise chronology of events. We weren't angry or vengeful. We were precise and professional. During a pause, Ronan looked at me. You know, you're not just exposing him. You're reclaiming yourself. That's the most important part. I couldn't speak, but a faint smile formed. The clarity of that statement hit me like the flash of static lightning from weeks before. For so long, I had tolerated small lies, half-truths, and the pretense of trust. Now, every step we took was rooted in honesty and control. By evening, we had sent the emails to regulators and journalists, carefully packaged, leaving no ambiguity. I watched as confirmation notifications popped up, receipts of receipt, acknowledgement of review. It was happening. The first wave of consequences was in motion, and for the first time, I felt the exhilaration of empowerment. Later, as the city lights flickered through the rain-streaked windows, Ronan and I sat in quiet satisfaction. We'll monitor reactions, make adjustments, he said. But this is the foundation. You've done what most people never can, you've turned knowledge into action. I let the quiet settle around me, feeling a surge of gratitude toward him. With Ronan by my side, I wasn't just seeing the truth anymore, I was living it. And for the first time in months, I felt untethered from Adrian's deceit, free to build a life forecasted entirely by my own judgment and integrity. The following morning, the city seemed to hum with tension, though the sky above was an unassuming gray. I sat at my laptop, scrolling through the first waves of coverage. Adrian's meticulously curated public persona was unraveling faster than I could have imagined. Articles popped up with headlines pointing to misappropriated funds, unethical practices, and unexplained investments tied to Tessa. The evidence we had sent was irrefutable. Ronan sat across from me, a mug of strong coffee in hand. Looks like he's trying damage control, he said, tapping his fingers against the table. But once facts like these are public, narrative doesn't matter. Truth sticks. I nodded, still absorbing the surreal satisfaction of watching the fallout. For weeks, I'd felt trapped under the weight of deception, unsure if anyone could see the reality of Adrian's manipulations. Now, everything was out in the open. There was no spin, no pretense, just facts backed by timestamps, video feeds, and financial records. A soft ping drew my attention. A new email from one of the journalists we had contacted. They wanted to verify a small detail, a minor discrepancy in one of Adrian's transactions. I replied meticulously, ensuring no opportunity for misrepresentation. Each reply felt like a stitch in the fabric of my reborn life, weaving me into a pattern of honesty I had never been able to embrace before. Ronan leaned back, his gaze steady. "You handled this brilliantly," he said, not in flattery, but with genuine admiration. Most people would have panicked, tried to cover it up, or let fear dictate the pace. You controlled the storm. I allowed myself a small, private smile. His presence was grounding in ways I hadn't anticipated. He had been the calm, precise counterbalance to the chaos Adrian thrived in, and now I was beginning to realize how much I had needed that stability, not just professionally, but personally. By afternoon, we were fielding calls from other media outlets. Adrian, predictably, was attempting to contact regulators, his voice strained and defensive. The man who once made me doubt myself was now publicly cornered. I felt no triumph in that, only the quiet satisfaction of justice. He had manipulated, deceived, and concealed, but truth, like lightning, had a way of striking. Later, as we walked along the riverfront, Ronan finally broke the comfortable silence. "You know," he said, glancing at me with a mixture of amusement and something warmer, "I've watched you chase storms, but I think you're better at chasing the truth." I laughed softly, the sound freeing. "Maybe. But I couldn't have done it without you." The words, spoken aloud in the open air, felt like a declaration, an acknowledgement of trust, partnership, and a shared purpose. He reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from my face. "We make a good team," he said quietly. And in that simple acknowledgement, I felt the shift, I was no longer tethered to Adrian's deceit. With Ronan, I could navigate life's storms knowing my footing was solid, my perspective clear, and my heart, finally, open. The morning air was sharp, tinged with the scent of rain and ozone. A storm was approaching, though nothing compared to the one brewing in my life. Adrian, cornered publicly, had not disappeared quietly. Instead, he was attempting a retaliatory campaign, sending private inquiries to my colleagues, questioning my credibility, and subtly insinuating that the video evidence had been tampered with. I read one particularly pointed email aloud to Ronan. He's asking if I had access to the feed outside work hours. It's insinuation, nothing more, but it's persistent. Ronan's jaw tightened. He's desperate. That's why he's flinging mud. He can't attack the facts, so he attacks the messenger. I felt a surge of anger, brief, sharp, then tempered by clarity. This was exactly the kind of emotional manipulation that had kept me in uncertainty for months, making me second-guess my observations, my judgment, my instincts. Not anymore. I was no longer the one living in his shadow. Together, Ronan and I decided on a preemptive strategy. Every piece of data, every timestamp, every digital trace was reviewed, cataloged, and stored securely. We drafted concise statements, released them to regulators and journalists, and kept a meticulous record of each interaction. Each action was deliberate, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion, the exact opposite of Adrian's reactive, chaotic attempts to regain control. That evening, I found myself watching a live feed of a storm building over the coast. Lightning fractured the sky in brilliant, violent arcs. "It's beautiful," I said softly, not noticing I had spoken aloud. Ronan leaned beside me, arms crossed, eyes on the horizon. "Beautiful, but dangerous. Like some truths." I smiled faintly. "Yes, but you can navigate it. You can see the patterns, anticipate the strikes." He glanced at me, a small, teasing smirk tugging at his lips. "And sometimes you have to chase it straight into the heart of it." That subtle spark between us, the gentle warmth beneath our professional alliance, was no longer ignorable. I realized I had been conditioned to equate passion with danger, but with Ronan, it felt safe, anchored, even exhilarating. The way he observed, calculated, and yet trusted instinctually, it was different from anything I'd experienced with Adrian. By nightfall, news outlets had begun to retract Adrian's insinuations. Evidence was clear. Adrian's desperate attempts to smear me were ineffective against the thorough documentation we had prepared. Watching his credibility collapse in real time, I felt a rare, unencumbered freedom, not triumph over him, but liberation for myself. Ronan nudged my shoulder. "We make a hell of a team," he said, softer this time, not a comment on work, but on something more. I looked at him and, without hesitation, allowed the small, private truth to surface. "Yes, we do." For the first time, I felt the exhilaration of honesty paired with trust, realizing that the storms I'd spent my life predicting were no longer a threat. They were a thrill I could share, grounded safely beside someone who understood both the chaos and the calm. The aftermath of the storm was quieter than I expected. Not the storm outside. The wind and rain had passed, leaving the world glistening and washed clean, but the storm of deception, betrayal, and fear that had dominated the past months. Adrian's influence had evaporated. Regulators confirmed the unethical use of company resources. News outlets had published the full story of his financial manipulations, and his career was now in ruin. I could finally breathe. I stepped onto the cliffside observation deck near the research station, the ocean stretching infinitely below. The horizon shimmered with pale golds and silvers, the sun cutting through lingering clouds. Ronan was beside me, holding 2 cups of steaming coffee. He handed me one, our fingers brushing. It was a small, intimate gesture, yet it carried more reassurance than any words could. "I've always chased storms," I said quietly, feeling the weight of truth settle around me. "But I never thought I'd find one I wanted to stay in the eye of." Ronan chuckled softly, the sound low and warm. "And yet here we are." You've survived far worse than any lightning strike I've chased. You've earned this calm, and maybe even a little chaos you actually choose." I smiled, letting a shiver of anticipation and relief wash over me. The emotional clarity I had fought so hard to gain wasn't about Adrian, wasn't about revenge. It was about freedom, authenticity, and the courage to trust again. And for the first time, I felt completely free to trust someone fully. We spent the morning reviewing weather patterns for the upcoming storm system, analyzing data together, sharing predictions, and debating theories. Our collaboration was seamless, a perfect balance of instinct and intellect. Ronan's quiet pragmatism complemented my analytical precision. His daring matched my boldness. But more than that, his presence was grounding. Later, as the sun reached its zenith, he turned toward me, expression serious for the first time that day. "Juniper, I've seen you face lightning, hurricanes, and human deceit. I've watched you survive every impossible forecast, and I've never been more certain about anything in my life. I want to be in this storm with you. All of it. Will you let me?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I whispered, a laugh of relief and happiness escaping me. The tension that had gripped me for months finally dissolved into something warm and permanent. For the first time, I felt the thrill of danger paired with complete safety, the unpredictable excitement of chasing storms tempered by trust, honesty, and partnership. Together, Ronan and I were unstoppable, both in our work and in life. We had rebuilt our forecast from deception to truth, from chaos to clarity. As we turned to watch the waves crashing below, side by side, I realized that rebirth wasn't just surviving the storm. It was learning to navigate it with someone who understood both the power and the beauty of the tempest. And in that moment, I knew. The forecast was clear, the skies were ours, and we had finally found the calm at the heart of the storm, together.